In today's video, I want to talk about whether or not lone wolf survival is feasible in a long-term grid-down predicament. We're also going to be talking about the fascinating story of a man named Christopher Knight, who evaded authorities for 30 years. He was able to subsist off scavenging and thievery. So let's talk about it. Civilization is an effort which requires the collective specialized skill sets of thousands of people. A man or a woman by themselves can only ever achieve a certain level of survival and technological sophistication. So depending on your skills, the tools that you start with, and how well suited the place you're in is to survival, that's going to dictate how long you're going to be able to survive there and what level of sophistication you are going to be able to achieve. Most people, if they tried to bug out into the wilderness, are going to be barely surviving, and most are simply not going to make it. If you were separated from your family and your loved ones, what are some of the benefits of bugging out by yourself? Well, I guess one thing is autonomy. The ability to do what you want, when you want. You also have the element of stealth. More people means more noise, more things to go wrong. You also don't have to worry about the issue of politics and group dynamics. A person by themselves can become very efficient and, in a sensory, perceptual sense, very acutely aware of their surroundings. Obviously, for most people, bugging out into the wilderness will be utterly stupid and should only be done as an absolute last-ditch effort. Now, it may be the case that this is your only option. The question is, how long will most people be able to survive? If you've ever watched the show Alone, even the most skilled in primitive survival methods usually can only last 2 or 3 months at best, and they often end up losing a lot of weight. It's not only the physical aspect of things that you have to contend with, it's also the psychological. The solitude is what a lot of people aren't going to be able to handle. But if you can handle the solitude, then maybe, just maybe, you'll be able to survive. The fact is, in most climates, over time, your tools are going to start to break down. Your mind is going to start to break down. The clothing that you wear is going to start to decay. And realistically, even the most experienced of survival experts probably won't be able to survive in the wilderness for more than 3 months with what they have on their back. The only real way to survive indefinitely as a lone wolf is to scavenge and steal. And that's what Christopher Knight had to do for those 30 long years. The other downside is that you're not going to have any backup. Eventually, you have to go to sleep. And if you don't have anybody at your back, you're going to have to be incredibly acutely aware of your surroundings. And lastly, perhaps something which is going to get everybody is the psychosis aspect of things. People are not meant to be by themselves for prolonged periods of time. A key component of being human is our ability to socialize with other people. When you lose that, as Christopher Knight's story indicates, you also lose your identity. When Christopher Knight was asked, what is it like to be alone for 30 years and not to talk to anybody, he said the following: solitude bestows an increase in something very valuable. I can't dismiss that idea. Solitude increased my perception. But here's the tricky thing. When I applied my increased perception to myself, I lost my identity. There was no audience, no one to perform for. There was no need to define myself, and as such, I became irrelevant. My desires dropped away. I didn't long for anything. I didn't even have a name. To put it romantically, I was completely free. So as we can see from this quote, Knight was able to develop an acute awareness and a sensory perceptual union which was characteristic of that of a wild animal. Imagine, for instance, an animal who spent its entire life in solitude, like a mountain lion or a cougar. The visual and sensory acuity of that animal, how it becomes one with the forest around it. This would be the only way to survive long-term by yourself. So there is still some mystery around why Christopher Knight decided to venture off into the wilderness and live like a wild man. He said that he basically just parked his car alongside a highway, left the keys, walked into the wilderness, and never looked back. He had almost nothing when he disembarked, just rudimentary camping supplies. And the first thing he attempted to do was to get lost in the woods. He indicated that he largely kept to ridges and he stayed out of open areas. He traveled a lot at night. Although he was an able hunter and angler, he didn't take a fishing rod or a firearm with him. After 10 days of starving, he had said to himself, "It took a while to overcome my scruples, but eventually I had to eat. Eventually I had to steal." So Knight was able to subsist by stealing from people's gardens. He indicated that during his first weeks away, he spent a night in an unoccupied cabin and that it was a miserable experience. The stress of that, he said, the sleepless worry about getting caught programmed me to never do that again. Knight had to master the art of covering his tracks and not leaving any signage, leaving no trace in the truest sense of the word. The only place he was able to achieve solitude for 30 years was to remove himself from places where hikers were bound to venture, places too harsh for the average person to get to. Eventually, he began looting cabins. It is estimated that he committed 1,000 break-ins before getting caught. He had a system by which he would perch himself at the edge of the woods and meticulously observe the habits of families in their cabins alongside the ponds. He watched their quiet breakfasts and dinner parties. He observed the coming and going of their visitors and noted their vacancies. What he sought to understand was the migration patterns of people, when they went shopping, when the cabin was unoccupied. Everything in his life just became a matter of timing. He found that the ideal time to steal was deep in the night, around midweek, preferably when it was overcast and best in the rain. A heavy downpour was prime. People always stayed out of the woods when it was wet. And Knight sought at all cost never to have any interaction with people. Knight also never walked on roads and trails, just to ensure that he wouldn't be seen. He also tried to vary his methods. He didn't want to develop any patterns of his own that the authorities could use to predict where he was going to be at any given time. He even started to borrow various tools and return them to the owners. One of the things that he would often borrow was a canoe or a boat in order to steal stuff, and he would always return it in order to avoid any suspicion. He avoided touching things, and he would never actually break in. He would always try to use a lockpick and always try to make it look like nothing had been tampered with. The authorities who were pursuing Knight for all these years were quoted as saying, "The level of discipline Knight showed while breaking into houses is beyond what any of us can remotely imagine. The legwork, the reconnaissance, the talent with locks, his ability to get in and out without being detected." We'll probably never know Knight's true motivations for disembarking into the woods. Was he running from something, or was this just some way of ending his own life? So what do you guys think of Christopher Knight's story? What do you think his motivations were, and how would you fare? How long could you last if all you had was the stuff on your back and you had to venture out into the wilderness, if you had no other choice? Because I have to say again, this is not an approach that I'm advocating for. It's not ethical to steal and scavenge, but could you make the argument that if society collapsed and you were by yourself, could you make the argument that if you were to do it like Knight did, would it be ethical if you had no other choice? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com. The best quality products at the best prices. Use discount code SURVIVALPREPPER, all caps, all one word, for 10% off. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.